No music, no rehearsal, no sound check, didn't speak the same language, and my amp blew up. In this video, I'm going to tell you one of the funny gigging, like nightmare gigging stories that I had back when I was in Nashville playing music there. I'm in the middle of editing some videos and I didn't have time to get one out today, but I wanted to make sure that I got a video out. So I just thought I would share this funny story that was one of my nightmare gigging stories. So grab a cup of coffee or whatever you want to drink, and let me just tell you all about it. So back in from 2001 to 2005, I lived in Nashville, tried to kind of do the music thing there. I realized I really wasn't that great of a player, at least good enough to be a session player. And anyway, long story short, there was a few years where I was trying my best to play gigs and do different things. And being in the more of the church world, that was most of the gigs that I got were somewhat church related, whether it was playing for a Christian artist or playing on like a Christian album or whatever the case is. So a friend of mine's dad was somehow associated with a Spanish speaking congregation. So he was Puerto Rican and he was one of the elders or something in this Spanish speaking congregation. And they had a special guest artist from, I think she was from Mexico, coming in to Nashville and was going to do this big church service, right? So he asked if I would be willing to put together a band and to play for this artist coming in. So I said, sure, shouldn't be a problem. What do you need? And it was guitar, keys, drums, bass, electric guitar. I think that was all the instruments that we needed for that. And you know, so any other than that, that was all of the information that I was given at first. So I got on the horn, put together a band of just guys that I knew. And usually at, you know, the kind of the level that I was at and the people, the influence that I had, usually it was guys, Nashville's got a lot of really good players, but it was guys like in their early 20s. So not necessarily the most seasoned players, but a really good group of guys. So as it got closer, I was asking my friend's dad, like, okay, we need chord charts. We need, you know, what are we going to be playing? And he just kept on like deferring back to this artist coming through. I have no idea what the name of the artist is, by the way. If my life depended on it, I could not name the artist. But apparently she was really famous in like the Spanish speaking world. Anyway, so he kept on saying she'll have everything. She'll have everything you need. So I thought, okay, that makes sense. Because, you know, if you're a traveling musician or a traveling artist, maybe you have like, you know, chord charts, or you have, you know, your set list and all that kind of thing put together. So I thought, okay, when we get to the rehearsal, she's just going to kind of hand out charts, which is kind of expected, you know, and that was kind of what I was used to. Is a lot of times you'd show up to a place, do a gig or whatever, and you just get a chart and you just be expected to play through it. I thought, no big deal. The band's good enough to play through it. So 4 o'clock rehearsal, 7 o'clock service performance. And that my expectations are we're going to come in for rehearsal. We've got like maybe 2 hours to be able to do this, knock through this rehearsal. We'll do our sound check, final sound check, take a little break, come in for the service. So I show up and the rehearsal is not in the venue that we're actually going to be playing. It's in this adjacent, smaller, like older church building, and has this like real bad sound system. It was not a very enjoyable sound system and equipment and all that kind of thing. Nobody knew how to run anything. So I was running back to the soundboard and showing the guy how to do stuff. And it was a small building anyway. I'm not dogging anybody for their sound system or anything. It was just, it wasn't what I was expecting for this gig. And by the way, he did say, I don't know if I mentioned this, he did say he was going to pay us $150 a person, which I thought was well worth it. Especially at that time, $150 was like, hey, that was a lot of money to play one night gig. So we get there and 4 p.m. rolls around. The band's there. This artist hasn't shown up. I'm looking at him, and there's nobody to even ask questions to. So finally, about 20 minutes later, she rolls in and introduces herself to everybody. There, she speaks a little bit of English, like did a pretty good job speaking English. I speak like a little bit of Spanish, so there was a little bit of a language barrier, but it was enough where we could kind of communicate and get through things. So I said, hey, well, what songs are we playing, and where you have charts for us? And she said, oh, no charts. We're just gonna play these songs. Like, mind you, like these are not songs that I've ever heard in my entire life, right? So she's rattling off in Spanish the songs that I'm supposed to somehow know, right? And the band is all looking at me like what are we doing here? And so I sit down with her and I was like, hey, I don't know any of these songs. And she said, okay, well, just kind of play. And like, I was like, we don't know what to play. Literally, we don't know what key it's in. We don't know what the rhythm is. We're the band, you're singing to it. How is this even possible? So I was at this point super, super, super thankful for every bit of ear training that I ever got in college, every bit of jazz band, just kind of hear what's going on, just playing through the changes, all of that, like in my brain of stuff over the years culminated in this one moment where I had to like put it all into action. So I sat down with my acoustic guitar and we sat on the front row of this old church building. And also, by the way, there was no, even if I did have a chord chart, there was no way to copy it. There was no access to a copy machine as well. So I literally found a scrap piece of paper. Like I told the band, like, find scrap paper somewhere. And we found some scrap, like the back of paper, and wrote down the chord charts for these. And by the way, writing down the chord charts entailed me, like, her singing the song. She would like sing the first line of the song, and I would kind of figure out what key we were in. I'm like, all right, we're in the key of G, write that down. And then figured out what the time signature was, figured out what the rhythm was. And it was a lot of like Latin rhythm stuff. Fortunately, our drummer was awesome. He was a really, really good drummer. And I think our bass player was really good too. And they really helped out a lot once we got going. So he was able to like nail down that feel of the drums. So we're in there and we end up within about an hour. So it's about 5:30. It might have actually been closer to 5:45. I have a copy of 8 or 9 songs on scrap paper, literally like 3 pieces of paper. I'm like chicken scratching this chord charts down. I don't have any ability to like write out the words on top, nor would it be any good because I couldn't understand what was being sung. So I got down, all the guys in like a huddle, and I was like, here's the chart. And I flipped it around and I said, copy it down as best you can. So we copied it down. And finally, about 6 o'clock, we have an hour before the service is going to take place, normally which I would think I would go to like the actual venue. But they had something going on ahead of time where we weren't allowed in the room until like 10 minutes before 7. So we were doing our rehearsal inside this other building, and I hook up my guitar. I had just purchased this crate. It was called a DA60, I think, and it was an acoustic amplifier. And I loved it, man. And it was like the first amp that I'd ever saved up and bought. It was $500, and I loved that thing. It had a DI out in the back, and so I would use that kind of as like my monitor slash. It had some effects built into it. So I plugged up the XLR cable into the back as like the DI, and as soon as I plug it in, it starts to smoke, and I see this blue sparks and flames shooting out of the back of the amplifier. And so like I turned it off, pulled out the XLR cable, completely fried my amplifier. Completely fried it. Like I turned it on, and it just made this like sound, worthless. No sound of the guitar came through, none of the effects, nothing. It was just, it completely fried the amp. Later on, I actually took it apart and tried to fix it, and I couldn't fix it. So that amp, I ended up selling at a garage sale for $8. I should have kept onto it just for the cabinet. I don't know what I was thinking. Anyway, so at this point, we've had the opportunity to, so I grabbed a DI box. They fortunately had a DI box in that building, and I hooked up to their sound system with my guitar, and we had time to run through the songs one time. So all that's happening, and I'm just like, we're all like looking at each other. The band is like, this is the funniest gig we've ever been a part of. Fortunately, with that though, because it was so chaotic and like basically unorganized, and it was like the expectations were not there of like what I would have as expectations. So we go over to the venue, we get plugged up, and the sound check consisted of basically just making sure the instruments were on. And so I just turned to the band and I was like, listen guys, let's just have fun. Let's just have a good time with this. If we mess up, if we miss the changes, if you for some reason stop playing or lose where you're at, we'll figure it out. Let's just go for it. And this nightmare gig turned into actually one of the funnest times that I had in a gig, because it was kind of like getting thrown into the deep end on something. So instead of normally where it kind of like you can kind of get your ducks in a row with playing somewhere, it was like all of my adrenaline, all of my like things. Every gig you always have some things you kind of have to fall back on, of like stuff you've established, or like like if it is your ear, you kind of fall back somewhat to some extent on like hearing things and hearing the changes. But it was like 100% falling back on skills that had been built up over the years. I'm not saying I had the best skills built up over the years, but I was falling back on them nonetheless. So anyway, it was a blast gig, and we got done with it. Yes, we made tons of mistakes throughout it, but nobody like cared or noticed that we made mistakes, playing wrong chords, transitions, even like the chord charts. It wasn't even like laid out. It was like verse, chorus, bridge, and we didn't even know when we're going to be doing it. So there was a lot of like turning to people and like, we like look at the piano player, like, do we know where we're at? You might yell out chorus. And anyway, it was just fun. So that was my nightmare gig. It was kind of a nightmare gig turned into not so bad. But anyway, hopefully you enjoyed this story. And if you like this kind of story, I have about, I don't know, a half a dozen or a dozen good stories like this, nightmare gig stories of various things that happened in a short period of time. And if you want to hear more of that, let me know in the comments and I will do that. Anyway, Kennis Russell, thank you so much for watching. If you want, you can subscribe to this channel, support me on Patreon, do all that kind of stuff. And I'm out of here, and I'll see you in another video.